Being helpful could have cost me my life, and a friend of mine was so oblivious to danger that his act of kindness could have ended us all. Tonight on Gloom Station, I'm going to tell you two short stories that actually happened to me when I was a teenager. One was my own fault, and the other was me trying to keep a friend from getting hurt. When listening to this, remember that oftentimes, people are the most dangerous thing out there. With that out of the way, find a quiet place, dim the lights, and let yourself sink into the unknown while you listen closely. I did something incredibly stupid when I was 17. I picked up a hitchhiker in the middle of the night. My best friend and I were coming back from the beach. It was around midnight, and he was so tired from our day trip that he hopped in the back seat and went to sleep while I drove. We were only about 30 minutes from home, but the toll of the day and the road were starting to weigh on me. Pretty soon, the road was starting to blur. I didn't want to stop this close to home since we only had a few minutes left. I had the music going, but it wasn't doing much to help keep me awake. I started to force my eyes open wide, and I was looking all around the road as we passed long stretches of dark houses and empty woods. Up ahead at the stop sign, I saw a guy waving his arms at me, and I was so deliriously tired that I actually rolled the window down and said hey to him. He was very clean looking and well spoken. He said he just needed a ride a couple blocks and that he had been walking for a long time already. Thinking about it now, as I'm writing this, that was one of the stupidest things I'd ever done in general because it was so late. It was so foolish of me. I was young, and you never know who you could be letting in your vehicle. Either way, I unlocked the door and I let him in. He got in quickly and fastened his seatbelt, then told me that the road he needed to get to was just up ahead, and he offered me a smoke, which I declined. I started driving and he was asking me all kinds of questions. At the time, I was happy to have the conversation just to keep me awake. He started to ask less questions as we went, and whenever I asked him something about himself, he would just go around the answer. He offered me another smoke, and again I said no. I got to the road he wanted me to take him to, but when I stopped the car, he said it was actually a different road just a few blocks over, but he didn't look at me when he said it. I told him I wasn't going that way, and without looking at me, he told me just to take him the rest of the way since we were right there. At this point, I was now tired and a little antsy. I tried to be cool with him, and again I just said no, I wasn't going that direction and he could walk the rest of the way. Then he looked at me. The way his eyes were now made me nervous. He suddenly looked angry and irritable. It was clear that me resisting was going against whatever plan he had. He unbuckled his seatbelt, but he didn't touch the door. Internally, I was already panicking. I glanced into the rearview mirror to see that thankfully my best friend was sitting up awake and alert. He knew what was going on. The hitchhiker must have noticed what I was doing. He looked in the mirror, then he turned and made a surprised sound and laughed it off. He said he didn't even know somebody was back there. The anger was gone. The mean disappeared. Then he smiled at me and said thanks for the ride and got out like it was nothing. I let out an audible sigh of relief and I hit the gas. As soon as he was able to, my friend climbed back into the passenger seat, and I noticed a screwdriver in his left hand. He told me he had grabbed it from the floorboard as soon as the guy asked to be taken to a different road. We drove off, leaving the hitchhiker behind, but when I looked back at him, the man was walking back the way we had come from. Walking back to a place he knew he'd have a good chance of being picked up, if anyone else was that stupid. After that, my friend gave me a well-deserved lecture about how dumb I was for picking someone up. And I could only agree with him because part of me was still in shock that I did it at all. I've never picked anyone up before or since. And truly, I don't know if that man had any ill intent. But I do feel like he had a devious plan the whole time. I'm just glad it didn't play out any other way. And I'm lucky my best friend was there to have my back, being smart while I was being stupid. An act of kindness could have gotten us killed. When I was a senior in high school, all of my friends would meet up at the bowling alley every Friday night for blacklight bowling which started at 10 p.m. until midnight. There'd be 10 of us bowling in 2 lanes. Just a bunch of friends hanging out and watching each other bowl. Now mind you, this was in 2008, so it was before Snapchat, Instagram. Nobody was on their phone all night unless they were just texting. We were living in the moment, dancing in between throwing bowling balls, eating crappy food, and drinking Monsters because none of us were old enough to actually drink. Having said all that, I now realize how my dad must have felt when he told me about how times were simpler in the 70s. The point is, it really was the glory days. Which also means it was when we were expected to make dumb choices. But this dumb choice could have cost us our lives. My buddy Fred was a nice guy, a genuinely caring person that would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. Now this also made him extremely naive sometimes. About 10 minutes before bowling was over, I saw Fred at the front door talking to a guy I'd never seen before. A few minutes later, I looked back to see that Fred was gone. When I asked another buddy of mine where he went, he said, I don't know, some guy needed a ride, so he's giving him a lift. I remember this feeling coming over me, like something was either horribly wrong or going to go horribly wrong. So I put my regular shoes on, grabbed a friend I had rode with, and we ran to the parking lot just in time to see Fred in his car leaving the parking lot. We ran to my friend's car and I told him to follow Fred no matter what. I tried calling Fred and for whatever reason he didn't answer. I tried again and again while we followed as best we could around traffic that seemed determined to keep us apart, even so late. When I realized we were downtown, I remember thinking, please don't go to the Bottoms. In my city, in the heart of it, is a place where people live in rundown houses that don't have doors. They barely even have sheets on them. The windows are covered in plywood or tarp. It's a place nobody goes unless you're at your lowest point. It's the Bottoms. It's definitely not a place you'd want to be at any time, least of all midnight. And Fred turned down the only street that led to it. We were able to get right behind him now and followed so closely that I thought our bumpers would touch. Then Fred stopped. The stranger got out of the passenger seat and walked quickly towards something I wouldn't even call a house. As soon as the stranger disappeared behind a curtained door, I told Pete to lock his doors and follow us. Then I got out, ran up to Fred's car, and got inside. Fred was absolutely shocked to see me since he had no idea it was us following him the whole time. I asked him what the hell he was doing, and he said, that guy needed a ride. He went inside to get me some gas money. I could have laughed, but instead I looked up toward the house just in time to see what looked like 3 or more figures stepping out of the house. Their silhouettes were barely visible since the house they had come from didn't have a single light on. It probably didn't even have power. I didn't have to see them clearly to know that they had bad intentions. I yelled at Fred to go. He was confused, so I yelled it again, and he hit the gas. Thankfully, my buddy behind us did too. And we were in such a hurry to get out of the Bottoms that Fred ran the stop sign, and our friend did too since he was close behind us. I immediately felt relief. We were safe. We were out of the Bottoms. That's when a cop hit his lights. Both of our cars pulled over, and within 5 minutes we were surrounded by police. At least 5 patrol cars, a K-9 unit, and even the sheriff himself. We were told to get out of the vehicle and submit to a pat-down while the dogs circled the cars looking intensely for a mark that would give them the necessary cause to search our vehicles. When the dogs found nothing, the police asked if we could look in the vehicles. We were terrified, but it didn't stop us from demanding to know why we were being searched when all we did was run a stop sign. The sheriff came over to us and told us their reason. He outright said that the only people of our color that come to the Bottoms are either buying or selling drugs. He then told us that 90% of the city's homicides in the last 5 years have happened within a 5 blocks radius of where we are now. He was furious when we told him the only reason we had driven to the Bottoms was to give somebody a ride. He was so angry that he literally threw his hat on the ground while yelling at us not to be so stupid and reckless with our lives. We were let go and told not to be seen here again. And when we left, it was with each of us knowing we would never go to the Bottoms again. What's crazy is that now, 10 years later, the Bottoms are still the most dangerous place in the city. I've never been back down that road, but I often wonder if I overreacted that night, or if my gut instinct kept us all from harm. Those are the only stories I wanted to share tonight, and I hope you enjoyed them. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to hear more. I have some other videos on screen now that I think you'll like. But that's all for now. Stay safe out there.